your message amplified.
Hello, both of you, out to the crowd. Thanks for coming in. Quick show of hands. Oh, first of all, quick housekeeping thing. You should be on the red for your headphones. If you can't hear me speaking right now, it's because you're not on the red for your headphones. Get that there. There we go. All right. Now, I'm not sure it's any better this way now that you can hear me, but there you are. I'm Mark. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Podbean. I've got a quick question for y'all. I don't know why my slides aren't showing here. Hold on a second. Don't show the answer. Oh, there we go. All right. For podcasts that get more than 1,000 downloads in the first 7 days after an episode release, right? So we've got 1,000 downloads or more for podcasts. How many people think that percentage, the percentile of podcasts that get it, is greater than 50%? All right. How many think it's less than 50%? Less than 20? Less than 10? Less than 8? All right. There's not really good centralized statistics. Industry consensus, though, is 5%. And so when you think about this, 5% of shows getting over 1,000 downloads within the first day of an episode release. 45% of those shows, or 45% of the advertising revenue is going to those top 5% of shows, right? How many people here have a top 5% show? I'll hand you the microphone right now. I promise you are more qualified than I if you have one. Nobody has, right? Because there's a very long tail in podcasting. Podcasting's long tail has a secret, and that is there is 1,000 ways to monetize, and 1,000 ways to grow your show, and 1,000 ways to get what you want out of podcasting, but you got to be smart about making the right decisions, going the right way. So at Podbean, I get to deal with customers in all walks of the podcasting journey. And I myself don't have a podcast because I don't like to hear my own voice, believe it or not. But I get to work with some of the most amazing creators who have monetized in ways that are creative, that are robust, that are repeatable, that don't depend on a strict audience size and getting $8 per 1,000 impressions, right? And so what I wanted to be able to do is come here and talk to you today about how you can make some strategies that create a feedback loop between growing an audience and a community around your podcast and give you opportunities for monetization that actually are worth following, actually worth pursuing, that'll give you some kind of return on investment. It starts with where are you going, right? I think the podcasters that I've worked with that have struggled the most did not have a clear vision of their goals, of what they wanted to put together. You can do anything with your podcast. Not everybody's in it for the money, right? And that's great. I think about it. I'm a musician. I play a guitar. I'm not a rock star, right? I don't do it to be a rock star. I just sit in my living room and annoy my wife. But you can be a rock star playing the guitar. It's a different strategy, right? So you're going to put things into your podcast. You're going to put thought and knowledge, research. You're going to put time and effort. You can put money. What do you want to get out of it? Those things translate directly into outputs for your podcast. So is it important for you to build authority, to build growth and satisfaction for yourself? Or are you looking for that revenue? It's usually a combination of all those things, right? But to different degrees. I'll give you the example of a podcast that we have on our network called Small Fortune. And it is as niche as they get. It is a vineyard broker talking with wine industry experts about the real estate in the wine industry. Anybody listen to Small Fortune in this room? No? Yeah. Jared there produced it for a little bit. But that podcast has maybe 1,000 listeners in a month right now. But it's the top of funnel for her brokerage, and it brings her all kinds of recognition, all kinds of thought leadership, and it pays off on the revenue side because people hear her on the podcast, know her, trust her, like her, come to her business, and work with that brokerage. All right, so that's one way that a customer does it. But we have somebody else who's, anybody heard of DNA Today by any chance? DNA Today is a brilliant podcast by a woman named Kira Deneen. and she has really put together the strategy that I think will fit for most people in this room. As a niche independent podcaster, she's put together a strategy that allows her to build sponsorships across her ecosystem. So it's not just the podcast. It's everything about what that podcast touches. And instead of selling impressions-based advertising, she's selling package sponsorships for 10 times what that audience on a commoditized advertising would be worth. So the idea here is whatever your podcast is, figure out what you want to get out of it, right? Does this lead to something else? Do I have broader monetization strategies behind it? Or am I looking to just grow the biggest audience that I can as fast as I can? I'll give you a hint, that's the rockstar strategy. It works out for a few, but only a few. And so where you want to put your effort is, where am I most valuable to my audience? We'll talk about that here. I'll go. So putting that into some kind of structure. As you grow, as you create monetization, you grow your ability to grow, right? That's kind of the whole point of what we want to talk about today. So you start out trying to attract attention. As you're attracting attention, you're building a social media following, you're building value to a potential partner on that side of things. You gain that recognition, you increase that value. You establish your authority, now you've got that top of market funnel thing we talked about. You also have a much higher value to potential advertisers to reach your audience because you have that higher trust factor. Eventually you're building up goodwill with an audience, and that creates a desire, and you start delivering real value directly to people outside of your podcast. Ultimately, the whole point of what you're doing for the growth income loop is to create word of mouth marketing. All marketing, I say this in every speech. If you come to a speech before, you've heard this. All marketing is word of mouth marketing eventually. You can't arbitrage anything you'll pay for into anything if you don't get people talking about your podcast and how you do it. And so you empower those advocates, and you start to see that multiplier pay off. Part of doing that, and this is where I think a lot of opportunity in this room exists, is to understand the power of direct engagement. Users with I've got a couple stats down here from and these are, I'm a marketing nerd at heart, so these are marketing nerd stats, but they apply to podcasting. If you think of podcasting as a service, as a product that you're providing, I think this is very, very eye-opening, right? Users that engage with a paid service have been consistently more likely to engage as a referral resource than those utilizing it for free. Right? So subscriptions or some other way of interacting with you isn't just a way of building up revenue. It's a way of feeding into that feedback loop that you can get and empower a whole set of advocates for your brand that are far more likely to refer. And you start building that feedback engine. Also, the referrals that come from people that, those referrals will drive a 3x to 5x conversion rate over traditional marketing channels. So there's lots of ways you can advertise your podcast. But consistently, YouTube is, I think, still number 2 behind I heard from a friend, right? And that I heard from a friend is where all the power in this industry is. So as you start to arbitrage the revenue side of that, we're looking at a creator take of about $8 per 1,000 impressions on just programmatic advertising. So if you happen to get enough downloads that you can sell programmatic advertising, that top row there shows you on your growth stage what it's worth to you. Oh, that is tiny. The bottom says 1 month of, so this is $1 a month from 5% of your audience, right? So that's what the bottom represents. And that's that direct engagement revenue stream that we're talking about. Now, the easiest thing to think about there is subscriptions. And you can through us, I know you can do Apple Podcast subscriptions, you can sell them through Patreon, you can do any number of ways, but there are other far more creative ways that are not either or, they're yes and to the subscription model. Merchandise is a popular one. I've been talking to some great podcasters with my favorite podcast name. I'm going to try to remember this now. It is A Little Bit of Makeup and a Whole Lot of Jesus. And if you go to A Little Bit of Makeup and a Whole Lot of Jesus.com, you will see a brilliant podcast, but you will also see links to merch, a book, a whole ecosystem built around this podcast. So that's why I set it up as, if you can figure out a way to get just $1 a month from 5% of your audience, your growth curve looks like that bottom, right? So when you get to 10 to 50,000, at 50,000 downloads, you're getting $2,500 a month versus 160 on programmatic advertising. Now, the good news is you can get both of those. You're not choosing a strategy, but you do have to choose where you put your time and effort. And if your time and effort is in, well, the ads will come as I grow my audience, you're missing out on a whole bank of opportunity to not only grow revenue, but to grow your audience along with that revenue. So being a marketing nerd, I have one other piece I'm going to pull in here. And this is Rogers' diffusion of innovation. Has anybody seen this chart before? It's been around for a bit. So thinking of your podcast as a product, as a service to be sold. The idea here is the people who first listen to your podcast, those are the innovators. Those are the people who are on the edge of, hey, I want to get there, right? Maybe some cousins. But mostly it's going to be the people who are on the edge of looking for exactly what you're talking about. They're going to be the ones that are going to find. They're going to talk to some other people, and you'll get the early adopters in that curve. And then you'll get that early majority, eventually a late majority, and some laggards. But depending on where you are in your podcast journey, you can map who your audience, your new audience is. Who's that audience that you're acquiring? Where do they fit on this chart? Right? How do you know that about them? Well, you're going to have some conversations with them. You have to enable your content or your comments. You're going to have to engage with them on social media. Get a sense of, where are you coming to my podcast from? But there's a strategy that meets each of those phases of the curve. Again, very small. I didn't realize it'd be this far away from you. So I'll try not to read verbatim, but I do want to give you the core of what we're talking about here. The first is, as you're hitting that first round, your core fans, those innovators, you're trying to build that core tribe of evangelists that are going to go take your podcast out to the world and power the next parts of that curve. All right, so that's going to be founding members, like from Patreon. It's going to be just, hey, buy my coffee one day kind of donations. You want people, they're still kind of just in the wild. They're the innovators, so they're going to be the most flighty ones. They're going to be on to the next thing, attention-wise, as soon as you can. So you want to grab their attention quick, make them part of the creation of your podcast, give them some ownership of that, and you will find that pays off both in having money to fund the next round, but also in having people who now own a part of your podcast, emotionally speaking, to go out there and advocate your podcast. As you get more of those early adopters, your strategy shifts, and you start going to establishing a social proof, credibility, leveraging trendsetters, right? This is where you really start leveraging that word of mouth. Premium access starts to make sense here. So this is where you start doing the walled content, the subscriptions, early release. Ads, ad-free can be a really interesting way to get some of this premium engagement if you don't want to do a whole lot of bonus or early release kind of stuff. So even if you might not be making a lot on the ad revenue itself, you can be incentivizing premium subscribers, people who want to engage with you, to have that way of doing it ad-free. As you move into the early majority, you start to leverage that niche recognition. And this is where you really start to define your audience and their value. So defining that audience value becomes critical in these next steps, because as a commoditized podcast listener, and this is further down on the slide, but as a commoditized podcast listener, they're worth whatever CPM rate's going out on programmatic that day, right? So just assume somewhere around $8 to $12. But as somebody who is a specialized audience that your sponsors want to speak to and use your trust to get to, that has a much higher value. So you just have to be able to match who is that person versus what do they do, right? So I have a fake guy here. His name is, let's go with Steve. And Steve is a living human being. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a golf enthusiast, pharmacist, he's a news junkie. He lives in Kennewick, Washington, and he's an avid runner, right? Now, if I have a running podcast, Steve's highest value to me is probably as an avid runner, because I know that brands that want to speak to avid runners are going to know that Steve is an avid runner. And he's willing to spend in that area where other just living human beings may not be. So defining him in what marketing terms is your ideal customer profile, right? In podcasting terms, that's your core audience. You're just defining somebody else's ideal customer profile. Make sure you understand that audience. And as you grow through those later stages of the curve, you can leverage that to yield a much higher value than you otherwise would. I'm just gonna have to send out these slides. I did not realize. Now you made me very self-conscious with my type size. But leveraging that identity, you can run through a bunch of scenarios on how you can leverage each piece of that identity. I will skip it because that will be boring to read. But kind of making the point again, as a commoditized listener, somebody's worth pennies. As a subscriber, they're worth $1. As a potential client, if you have services, products, anything that you can sell to your client because they trust you, they like you, they want to be a part of what you're doing, right? So from merch, books, live events, all that kind of stuff. If you can do that, I don't know what that dollar is. It's a heck of a lot more than the $1 a month, though. So building that community, that active, that rabid community that's feeding your cycle of income and growth. Live events I've seen be very effective. Now the downside to live events is the more actual in person they are, the better, and they kind of localizes it. But you can still do live events, live feeds online, and that is effective. Making sure your content is interactive. Interactive content is huge for building ownership. And building that ownership is where you're going to find that 5% of your audience is going to donate or buy your merch or however else they're going to contribute more directly. Behind the scenes, I've seen work really well, particularly in a hybrid video audio kind of thing. So people will do an audio podcast and then put the behind the scenes on YouTube or in short form on TikTok or Reels. That's a really great discovery engine, and it's a really great way to build community. Identity markers is one. My wife always hates that I use her as an example in this, so don't tell her. But she used to listen to a show called My Favorite Murder. And they had this phrase that was like, "You're in a cult, call your dad." I heard that all the time. So it was, there was one that said, "Don't stay," or "Stay out of the forest," I think too. And that was on a bumper sticker for her car for a while. She identified so closely with that podcast, that she bought their merch, she put it on. She was part of that fandom. And that was really powerful. She told me and everybody else that she knew about that show, right? And then creating that insider. So the more you can create for your most avid and rabid fans, the sense of having ownership of your show, of being part of the whole thing as opposed to just consuming it, the more powerful that loop becomes. The last thing I'll say, yuck. As far as avoiding the rabbit holes, I don't know where that went. It's not rendering right. I'll tell you through the microphone, and then we can just listen to the recording after. How many people here track downloads as their primary source of success? Reach? How many have no idea, they're just happy to be podcasting? I mean, I'm for it, right? Wherever you are, you should be happy to be podcasting. You could be doing a lot worse. But I think there's a trap, because downloads and reach are the easiest things to measure, that we look at success as downloads and reach. But if we've really defined an audience and we understand their value to others and to us, then there are ways to track what we're doing that make a lot more sense, right? So for audience growth, yeah, I mean, you definitely want downloads, but if you're measuring downloads and you're not measuring reach, are you really getting a view of how many people you're acquiring? But the other thing that you should be looking at is how much of that audience is coming back, right? So that's not a statistic that's always easy to get. Like on Podbean, it's kind of a sample set, because we can only track any hosting platform you're on, can only track who's inside of their ecosystem coming back. But you can see it, and you can see, hey, if the audience is listening to my podcast on this platform, how many came back this month, right? How am I acquiring a new audience every time? For audience growth, that's a really important metric. For brand awareness and marketing, it's reach, but it's also downstream conversions. How many people are going to your website? Are you getting the merch sales for the merch that you mentioned? I put out coupon codes. If you use affiliate codes, that's another one I kind of skipped over. But affiliate marketing is big for being able to just create ways for your fans to engage with you at an identity level and do something they want to do. You know, how many of your affiliate codes are going through? Downstream conversion is probably the hardest thing to measure, but it's not immeasurable. It's just you have to understand how your audience is consuming what you're doing and where they're going with it. And then revenue generation, obviously dollars, right? Dollars are where you want to go for revenue generation. But in the long term, you're also going to want to keep an eye on that return podcaster and that downstream conversion for your, in this case, for your advertiser. Are they going through and converting into actual value for that advertiser? And how else are they manifesting in that way? So some of the ways that podcasters can manifest as value to sponsors is simply through brand lift. Right? There's a whole side of podcast advertising that's just brand lift. Are they going out thinking higher of that brand because they trust you? Right? That's something that's hard to measure, but not impossible. And if it's part of your strategy, it should be core to what you're doing. Right? Measure the result, not the indicator before it. It's kind of the idea to put behind that. I hope that gave some insight, some new ideas, hopefully, to monetize and grow your audience.